Okay. So at what point did we at what point should I go back to? This? Okay. Okay, so what we have here on the left is the median latency, 40 minutes. That's the testing time. And on the right is the percent of rats that open. And what you see is that if they're given an empty restrainer, they don't open. Okay, they go to the cutoff time, 40 minutes. But if they're allowed to release themselves, they do so. And on the first day, even though this is a very easy thing to do, only, I don't know, what is this? This is probably 9 out of the 16 rats open for themselves. And it took them almost 20 minutes, a median of almost 20 minutes to do so. So that's quite remarkable. But by day 2, it takes them under a minute or two. And out here, what happens is you put them in the restrainer, you put the door on, and as you're walking away, they've opened the door. So they're at 0, they're at immediate. And so what all this tells you is that the opening for the self, they don't want to be in the restrainer, but it's not so bad that that all the rats do it. So there was actually one rat that hung out in the restrainer. It's in fact not painful, but they'd rather not be there. They will not open for an empty restrainer. They will open very, very well for themselves. So where in that landscape does opening for a different rat, trapped rat, fall? And here it is. So what you see is that the opening for a trapped rat, they convert from not opening to opening. And out here, by the time they know what they're doing, I would argue that this delay here is just motor. It's much easier to know where the door is when you're stuck in the restrainer facing out than when you're out in the arena and trying to find where the door is on the restrainer. So this is probably mostly a motor delay. But once they get past that motor delay, they asymptote to the same place. So by latency standards, they're acting for the other trapped rat as though they would, in the same manner that they would act for themselves. Okay. So more evidence for conversion. Now here is that same picture that I showed you before. And the only point here is to say to you that we did pilots, and out here for this rat who opened 11 times in a row, if I now give him an empty restrainer, he will open it. He won't start to open if he's only exposed to an empty restrainer. But after opening for a trapped rat for many days, he'll open for an empty restrainer. And that's what we call a habit. It's an outcome independent action. And it's very similar to taking a drug of abuse. So heroin or cocaine, alcohol, all of these experiences, an individual keeps on doing them, even if the experience that they get, the immediate experience that they get, is not the same as, is not as rewarding as it was the first time. So it's a habit. So we asked the question, what point does this habit form? After 2 times or 4 times? We were just guessing. So we did an experiment where every time an animal opened twice in a row for a rat, they either got exposed to an empty restrainer or and then every other one went to 4 times in a row and then they were exposed to an empty restrainer. So here are the results. So before this dotted line here, they're being tested with a trapped rat. We had 2 groups, those who opened twice in a row, those who opened 4 times in a row, and then they get tested with a empty restrainer. And what you see is they open for forever. We did this for weeks. And they continue to open. They always opened for the empty restrainer. So just to put that in context, we wondered how it would compare to a habit that you could get from opening the door to access a highly palatable food such as chocolate. And so we did just the parallel experiment of giving them access to a chocolate within the restrainer. So they had to open twice for the chocolate, and then they were tested with empty for the rest of the days. And so this was a problematic experiment because most of the rats didn't open for the chocolate, and they certainly didn't open twice in a row, but a few did. And this one rat is very illustrative. So I'm going to show you this one rat's results. So this rat opened for chocolate chips on the first 2 days, and then was tested with an empty restrainer and didn't open. That's denoted by the black. Red is opened and black is did not open. And then on the 13th day, we decided, well, let's test this rat with a trapped rat instead of an empty or food, and opened twice in a row because they already knew, this rat already knows how to open the restrainer, just chose not to. So now opens twice in a row for a rat, and now when we test him with an empty, he opens. So the rat opening for a rat is habit forming. Opening for these chocolate chips is not habit forming. I should note that, the chips they're good, but these are not food deprived animals. They're not necessary. They're just added good. Now, so we had 2 findings when we compare this. Fewer rats actually got to open twice in a row for chocolate chips than for a trapped rat. This is 21 of 24 open for a trapped rat at least twice, and only 4 out of the 8 rats opened twice in a row for the chocolate chips. So oops. Oh, and then the proportion of openings. So after opening for a trapped rat, they always open for an empty restrainer. For the 4 rats that open for chocolate chips twice in a row, they open sometimes for the empty restrainer and sometimes not. So so opening for a trapped rat is habit forming, and that speaks to the strong reward, the strong motivating effect, the strong reinforcing effect of helping for a trapped rat. Now, the final experiment that we did is not one that's published, but we put these were rats that were very good openers, and we put the free rat here, we put the trapped rat here, and in between was a corridor where we put a pool, and in the pool we put oil, vegetable oil, and the rats would not walk across the pool to access the trapped rat, so they would not open the door. It was not worth it to walk through oil. But the minute we replaced the oil with water, they went walking through. So that tells you that they'll pay something. They won't pay infinite amounts, but they'll pay something to go help the other rat. So this tells you that helping is reinforcing. It feels good. Now, I want to get to one more experiment. So we did an experiment where we looked at the effect of bystanders, and we did this. I'm going to focus on this experiment where there were 3 animals outside and 1 trapped. We also did it with 2 individuals on the outside and 1 trapped. And these are the results. So in the first 6 days, what happened was that these trios opened on a median of 5.5 days. So they typically opened first on either day 1 or day 2. What we saw with and whereas control animals, where it's just one rat, one free rat, and one trapped rat, they opened on average on day 4 of the test. We're only looking at the first 6 days. So what happened with these trios was that they were such good openers that at the end of 6 days, I realized that we were not going to learn anything more by just continuing to ask them to open for the trapped rat. So I decided that we would test them individually. Now, when we tested them individually, you need to know one more thing, which is that when they were trios, in this trio, for example, it was always the same rat that opened the door. So all 3 of them could open the door, and all 3 of them might eventually have opened, any one of them might eventually have opened the door, but it was always one that beat the other 2 to do it. So we had this group of 3 rats, 2 of whom watched the other guy open. So then when we tested these rats, these trios individually, what we found was that the animals that had opened on day 6 did not open on day 7, and for the rest of the days they opened every once in a while. They opened very sporadically. Whereas if you take just one rat, one free rat, one trapped rat, if they open on day 6, they always open on day 7, and they open all 5 days. You saw that once they convert into opening, it's a solid open mass. But these animals who had opened in the context of having 2 other rats present, now we're not opening. And why is that? And so what I would argue is that, we called this the audience effect, but it actually has to do with what's called motivational crowding. And motivational crowding is that an extrinsic reward, and that can be money, it could be, or it could be social approval, social kudos, if you will, that an extrinsic reward, the presence of an extrinsic reward will undermine the development of an intrinsic reward. So what I'm arguing here is that because these trio rats opened and there were 2 other rats there, and the 2 other rats were very excited by what this opener did, that the opener got so much social approval from these other 2 rats that when this opener is given the opportunity to do the same thing, but without the audience, he doesn't have the intrinsic reward. He was depending on this approval from the other 2 rats. And there is evidence for motivational crowding in humans. This is just one example. If you're paid to donate blood, this is actually something that's shown bizarrely in women and not in men, but if you're paid to donate blood, you end up in the future donating blood less than if you do it for free, or if you do it with payment given to a charity. So being paid, receiving an extrinsic reward is counterproductive to the development of an intrinsic reward. Introduction of monetary payments may reduce the intrinsic motivation to behave altruistically or perform one's civic duty. That's their conclusion. Okay, so great. So despite our little hiccup, I've been able to get through everything. And what I want to tell you is that what I have told you, I hope, is that helping feels good. It feels so good that the rats want to do it again. and they want to do it faster and faster every time. It's such a powerfully rewarding experience that it may in fact be so positive that becomes an incentive in itself, that in fact doing this helping becomes a drug. Essentially, it becomes a version of cocaine. And you can imagine that it feels so good that a helper can construe their actions as helping, because that makes them feel really good, even if their action may not be actually received as helping. And, you know, an example of this is, for example, my mother is 95, and if she is exiting a taxi, people will run over to help her out. And because she's a little bit of an ornery person, she's a difficult person, she doesn't want help. I mean, that's just not her. She doesn't want the help. It makes her, she wants to be, she can get out. It takes her a little time, but she can get out, and she wants to get out by herself. So it's not help, but it is intended as help. So what I'm trying to say here is that that help is in the eyes of the beholder. Is very similar to color. It exists in the brain. It does not exist out in the world. And this is a problem for anyone that is interested in medicine, because in fact, medical doctors are in a very strong position to help people by doing stuff, and it makes them feel good. But sometimes the best course of action is not to do anything. So that's just food for thought. And the second thing is that the internal reward is fragile. It can be devalued so easily by others' opinions or extrinsic rewards. And I think that's a really interesting and valuable idea. And I'll just conclude by showing you lots of this is not an updated slide, but there are lots of people that have contributed to these works. Great. So I will stop share and take any questions.
Oh, thank you very much for your interesting lecture and for a willingness to give a lecture at our event. It is a great pleasure. It was really interesting and exciting. And yeah, we have several questions from the audience. So the first one is, are rats vindictive? Will they help after they have been harmed by another rat or human?
I don't know. Let me turn that around. Are rats grateful? We don't see any evidence that they're grateful. We don't really see any evidence that they're vindictive either, but we're not going to harm an animal. It's not really our style. The other problem with trying to answer that question is that you quickly come to a place where you're conflating harm and stress. And stress is antithetical to helping. So if you stress an animal just by just by exposing this animal to new humans, our animals are very well habituated. They know the people that they're dealing with. If you just stress them by exposing them to new humans, they don't do anything. They'll freak out and sit in a corner. So not an easy question to answer. And my guess is certainly we've had a few weird animals where when the rat got released, he beat up the free rat, or vigorously played with the free rat and pinned him down a lot. And the next day the free rat goes and releases again. Doesn't matter. Doesn't change the free rat's behavior. So I don't think so, but that's all I got.
So this intrinsic reward is stronger than revenge, right?
Say that again.
The reward they have after helping is stronger than their revenge give to
yeah, I think if revenge exists at all, yes.
Okay, thank you for answering. Our next question is, if mentioned to other rats problem, or will they still deal with their own problems finding food for it?
We've never done this systematically, but when we were at the very beginning, we started with a very different paradigm. And we did have food deprived rats, and they were extremely energetic at being around the restrainer. They really cared about. So I think that being food deprived makes them energetic, because they need to go out and find food, and as they're doing that, they see other things, including this trapped rat, and they do appear to care about that. But we've never studied that specifically.
This primary reward, craving for the primary reward, doesn't cancel the willingness to help, right?
So what's the question?
This craving for food for the primary reward, it doesn't cancel willingness to help. Get this?
So I don't know that. I mean, how would we do that? Food deprived, and I mean, one of the things that we've always not been able to do is to have two restrainers and to teach the rats that they get to open one but not the other. What we would in the US we would call that a Sophie's choice. But I've never been convinced that I could teach that to the rats. So I don't know how to answer that question, to pit the two together. So one of the things that we could do is to do the experiment that we did with the trios. Instead of doing it with a trapped rat, do it with food. And that actually is probably a good idea.
Okay, then, thank you for your response. And I assume that it will be our last question for today. Is there any specific hormone responsible for activating the help center, and where is the center located?
What was the second part of the question?
Where is the center located?
Oh, there is no center. The brain works by circuits, and so there's no help center. And what's really interesting about the intrinsic reward system is that we don't know what the pathway is. People can assume that it's that it is the same as the primary reward system, which we know something about, but we don't know that for sure. So you think about it in this way. We know a lot about the circuitry that supports drugs of abuse, say cocaine, heroin, etc. We know a little bit about the circuit that supports primary rewards, and the argument has often been made that those circuits are very similar. What we don't know at all, except that we know that accumbens is involved, is what's the circuit for intrinsic rewards. And what I think is so exciting is that our paradigm now gives us an opportunity to examine that circuit in particular. And my provocative suggestion would be that the intrinsic reward system is more similar to the drug of abuse pathways than to the primary reward pathways. That would be my guess, but we have to test that. As far as you don't really help because of hormones. You help more because of neurotransmitters, some of which act in a hormonal like way, but so the neurotransmitters involved are the usual, obviously glutamate and GABA for sure. And then there are the amines such as dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and then there are peptides such as oxytocin and others that are most assuredly involved. But it's not one center, one pump. It's just different from that. So how it works and how I don't think that the brain is coding for helping. It's coding for reward. It's coding for craving, things that make the animal feel good and want to do it again.
Okay, thank you. It appears to be much more complicated than we thought about it, but it's really interesting. And there is one more question I want
Sure.
to ask you as we have some time. So
Yep.
is the length of freezing relevant to helping reactions? Can we assume that its length is connected with animal anxiety level or openness to new experience?
I'm not getting the word lens.
Okay, I'll repeat the question. Is the length of freezing relevant to helping reactions? Can we assume
Is the
that
what
its
of
length,
freezing? The what of freezing?
the length of freezing relevant to helping reactions?
I'm sorry. Can
That
you just say that word? The what of freezing? Spell it or something. I'm not getting you the word.
length,
Lens?
time of freezing, maybe. How long the
Oh,
threads
the
are freezed?
length. Okay, the length of freezing. Say okay. So now now repeat the question. Now that I know the word.
Okay. Is the length of freezing relevant to helping reactions? Can we assume animal anxiety level or openness to new experience?
Our animals don't freeze. Our animals don't freeze at all. So
Well,
yeah.
in that experiment with rats, when the door was opening.
Oh, that
they
they're freezing. They're freezing. They're surprised by the sound. And that
yes,
was
so no connections between the length of freezing, the time they were freezed, and the helping reactions. Is there any?
I don't think so. The freezing goes away in a day or two. Yeah. And it's a pretty small range. It's 2 or 3 seconds to 5 or 6 seconds. There's not much there. We never
Okay.
looked at that, but I don't think so. I would be doubtful.
Okay. Thank you once again for your
thank you.
time, for very interesting lectures, for your answers to our questions. So yeah, thank you.
Happy Brain Week, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
And to all our listeners, I would like to invite you to our next lecture in 5 p.m. So thank you and goodbye.
Tak, bardzo dziękujemy Pani